What is a wish? What goes into a want or a desire, a wish, a need? What is that strong pull that we all know so intuitively but don't often examine? What does it mean to be pulled towards something? What's the force that's fueling that gravity? It's often not examined or not brought into conscious light outside of its drive, outside of its mechanism, outside of its goal. So I thought today we could speak to what the fuck this is all about. The more we get to know where our wishes come from, the more we get to know what is insatiable about our needs, the more we get to know what drives us towards a subject or object or thing, I think the more freedom we have in understanding those wishes more relevantly, practically, the more freedom we have from those wishes. And that's what's so important. That's what can be so helpful. The first intuitive, universal phenomenon to speak to is the reality that when we get something that we've wanted for so long, we often are left with disappointment. We often can feel lost or unsure or icky or ambivalent or even blah, depressed because we've accomplished said goal. So we get the new car, we get the promotion, we get the husband or wife, we get the new house, we get the child, whatever it is that we're supposed to do, or we feel that it was sanctioned, or we feel that we were subjugated to, through societal pressures. Well, obviously, in those examples, there's an external resource or drive that's pressing upon us in the work, in the motivation. Sometimes, however, depending on the person, it feels internally generated. But just because it's internal, it doesn't mean that it's a genuine or wholehearted wish. I internally desire a Ferrari. I think I have since I was a little boy, but I don't know how authentic that is as a wish in representation of who I actually am. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Maybe one of you can buy me a new Ferrari. That would be great. But what's vital here, what's so useful to examine, is the demarcation between the genuine wish, authentic wish, and of course one that's more neurotic or ego-driven or driven for self-image, false self, and so on. And to categorize that, the prerequisite is having to get to know ourselves, which can be incredibly frustrating and also incredibly liberating. If I, my whole life, have wanted to become president of the United States, that might be an attainable goal, maybe a realistic goal, depending on my family of origin and my means and my opportunities. At the same time, it might be driven by some sort of desire that is incongruent, doesn't match who I actually am, and in and of itself can be defensive. So there's a trust there that we're trying to bring about in understanding ourselves. We're trying to bring into conscious light. We're trying to bring into awareness. We're trying to separate the forest for the trees or the trees for the forest. Maybe the ego, the basic input output system that keeps us functioning, is not accurate in its desire, in its drives, in its motivations, in its wishes. Maybe it is, maybe it's a part, maybe it's a compromise formation. Another example of this, of course, is the hedonic treadmill, the rat race, the hamster wheel, where we're stuck on that slow incline, feeling as though we're moving somewhere, but in reality, we're stuck in place, motivated, of course, by the hedons, that is the pleasures of the desire, that we keep going and going and going in service of not feeling whatever it is that's fueling the belt around the treadmill. We don't want to examine it. We don't want to know. We don't feel comfortable with it. So it's much, much easier instead to stay on it, to stay married to that golden carrot on the fishing line right in front of our faces that we're going to one day grab and solve our problems of our life. There's also the golden handcuffs, right, that we're married to the job, the vocational, sometimes avocational pursuit in service of some omnipotence, some sense of control, some sense of mastery, sense of efficacy and strength and aggression that can help us feel better, help us feel like we're doing the right thing, help us feel in charge of our own lives. All of these examples are to do with wishes. All of them are needs, wishes, desires, and wants. Most intuitively is that example of, I don't understand why I don't feel well. I have everything I've ever wanted. I have everything I've ever wanted. That phrase itself is so much of the motivation behind this video. Honestly, I'm not sure exactly why I want to do this video, or even if I want to fucking do it at all. But I kind of want to do it, and I think I want to do it, and I'm examining the motivations at the same time. Which leaves me with this uncertainty and ambivalence that I think is useful to reveal to all of you, my folly and my humanity. Suffice it to say, the person who claims or illustrates I have everything I want and I'm not happy, or I'm not satisfied, or I'm not pleased, reveals this conflict. What is satisfaction? What is fulfillment? What is satiability? What is it that I have everything I wanted and yet I don't feel better? It should demonstrate to all of us then that desire itself is not necessarily authentic. It's not necessarily sustainable. It's not necessarily endogenous and generated or produced within our heart of hearts, the deepest parts of our person. So you get the thing, you get the promotion, you get the car, you get the spouse, modern society standard, and then we fall flat on our faces, psychologically speaking. We don't feel good, we feel blah, we feel irritable, we feel unsure. How could that be? Well, again, the more we relate to the genesis of the wish, the more we try to understand what is satisfying versus unsatisfying, the more we relate to a drive, a push against versus a wish of a pull towards, the more we get to know ourselves, the more we'll get to know if this wish is sustainable, if it's meaningful and congruent with who we actually are, and something that is genuinely our own. The wish for something that isn't our own will never satisfy. And that's what pisses us off. That's what we struggle with in today's world. The wish for the new shiny thing confers a wonderful feeling of pleasure, accomplishment, and satisfaction, but it dissipates. We've all experienced that. From the fantasy comes reality. And when reality bites, it's a motherfucker. It bites harder than anything we've ever experienced before. That loss of the animating fantasy and that resultant space that reality saturates, that's the problem. It is the fantasy itself that animates and mobilizes and drives the desire, the seduction, the pull towards, the gravity. It's not the thing itself in reality so much of the time. Again, it can be if it's authentic, congruent with who we are, contextualized by the best approximation and understanding of who we think we can be, wish to be, ought to be, through examination of ourselves and our own motivations. Nonetheless, so much of the time, it's not. So much of the time, it's a substitution, the defense against those more ambiguous and uncertain feelings. I think the most effective way to neutralize some of this, to examine some of this, to bring it into the conscious light of our own reflection, functional capacity to understand what makes us us, is to ask that tougher question of, is this amenable? Right? Is it available to the winds of change? Is it flexible as we are examining it? Is it a need? It's compulsive, automated, automatized, satiable? That would be neurotic. Or is it something that can be satisfied, is amenable to satiation? The big difference between a bottomless pit of hunger, as we all know, and one that fills you up. And sometimes that desire for love or desire for hate in and of itself can be insatiable, which is a big clue to the strength and power of a neurotic force. So all this is to say, if we can develop through the art and science and practice of getting to know ourselves more fully and authentically and effectively, having more responsibility and accountability for what goes on underneath our awareness, for all the operating engines that are producing so much of our lived experience. If we can tolerate not wanting as a state, then we will have a much better time wanting. That's the irony. That's the whole kit and caboodle. If I don't want something, that can be just as meaningful to place into the context of understanding myself consciously as it can be if I desire something with every bone in my body. Understanding where these wishes come from requires us to be tolerant of not knowing. There's an agnostic desire, an uncertain or ambiguous striving towards understanding. We have to be tolerant of the anxiety that emerges from not knowing. And then and only then will we have the wiggle room, the foresight or the insight to be able to examine what the fuck this is all about. If I want the Ferrari, if I want the husband or wife, if I want the new job or promotion or title, if I want the more money, if I want the house, if I want the child, if I want to be a movie star or the president of the United States. Desire is a key component to being alive, seeking life forward, pulling ourselves upward. Seductive forces are real and meaningful and natural, but we have to treat them as they are, as opposed to what we wish them to be. That wiggle room is contingent upon tolerating the uncertainty, tolerating the space that gives rise to the want as much as the antithetical not want. I don't want to eat broccoli for dinner. I do want to eat ice cream. It sounds silly or it sounds trite, but it's quite meaningful. Those contrasts can help us see what's genuine about ourselves, and in turn help us control those wishes. Is a key component to being alive, seeking life forward, pulling ourselves upward. Seductive forces are real and meaningful and natural. But we have to treat them as they are, as opposed to what we wish them to be. That wiggle room is contingent upon tolerating the uncertainty, tolerating the space that gives rise to the want as much as the antithetical not want. I don't want to eat broccoli for dinner. I do want to eat ice cream. It sounds silly or it sounds trite, but it's quite meaningful. Those contrasts can help us see what's genuine about ourselves, and in turn help us control those wishes or desires that might be driving us in a way not towards growth or change, towards pathology and pain unnecessarily. That's what makes them so powerful. That's what makes them so useful. The only way that they can be satisfied is if they are authentic. It is the measure of insatiability that clues us in to how neurotic or defensive a wish can be. If I'm never happy with what I have, if I'm never happy with my friends or family or partner, and something's going on inside of me that's getting in the way of feeling comfortable with satisfaction in reality versus the fantasy of limitless and effortless satisfaction that I can never attain. Reality bites. It's always going to rear its head and it's always going to kick our ass, but it's certainly a part of our life. The way that we perceive and relate to it is something that can inform us so deeply and influence us and help us change and grow tolerant. A way of living helps us find a much more sustainable and meaningful and long-lasting resolution inclusive of desire and satisfaction.